Peace and blessings, and thank you for subscribing to this YouTube channel, liking, and sharing. Thank you so much for watching the last episode, Unapologetically Me, Reverend, Principal, and Scholar. Today, as you can see, I'm a little more casual, a little more relaxed, but I'm still the Reverend, the Principal, the Scholar. Last week, we talked about one of the anchors of the ministry, faith. There are levels to this, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you continue to share it with your family and friends. This week, I want to talk about resilience. Resilience. I define resilience as the product, something that you gain after you go through life's challenges, obstacles, trials, and tribulations. This is a very personal episode for me, and one of my femtors said to me, make sure you only share what you're healed and you're whole from. And so today, I will be sharing real life experiences, 3 examples from my life that have helped me build my resilience. So my first example involves my childhood and my mom. Most people know I was born into a single family home, single parent home, right? I am the daughter, the 6th child of Peter and the late Mary L. Barnes. When my father lived in our home, he lived in our home with all of my siblings. But when my mom was 8 months pregnant with me, he left the home. And so it's strange to even talk about now that my mom will say on my birthdays, when she would call me, she would say, before she would say happy birthday, oh, yeah, around this time, I'm going to the hospital by myself. So that was real. You know, when I think about it, it still gives me a little bit of chills, right? Because it's a time of celebration for me, but it was always a time of sadness for her. It was the reminder that she was raising 6 children by herself. And so I did not grow up with my father in my home. So I did not know a father's love and protection in the home. I had no aspirations for marriage or children. I did not see that example in my home. What we saw was abandonment, limited financial resources, struggles. And through it all, we witnessed our mother endure. We witnessed our mother work 2 jobs. Almost all of my life, I know that she worked 2 jobs. Normally, my mother would work a night shift so that she could be home with her 6 children during the day. And so she would be home, you know, taking care of the home. We watched her pray, we watched her clean, cook, and keep a roof over our heads. That's what we witnessed from our mother. And no matter what happened, no matter what situations came up, she met the challenge. I remember as a young child, since I was the youngest, I was always with my mother. So all of my childhood, I remember her working, cooking, and struggling to pay bills. But we lived at one address my entire life. We had one phone number, 201-333-0388. We lived on Vreeland Terrace, which overlooked the Statue of Liberty. She kept a roof over our heads. And so a challenge that came up for my mother, for my family during my childhood, I was about 16 years old. And I was attending one of the most prestigious high schools in the country, Academic High School. It's now McNair Academic High School. Most people that know my family, they know that my brother was charged as being a kingpin, right? And so that's public knowledge. He speaks about it freely. And there came a time that I was in academic high school, my mother was working 2 jobs, and on this Saturday, I will never forget it, the police department issued a no-knock warrant into my home. And so myself, my mother, my sisters, we were half naked, and this no-knock warrant, all of these police officers in our home. And I just remember being face down on my living room floor with a shotgun, 16 years old, pointed at me. And I looked up at my mother and I saw shame. I saw hurt in her eyes. To add insult to injury, the trial started. While I was in school, going to school every day, get the picture, this prestigious high school, I would walk into the building and see my classmates and my teachers looking at the newspaper. Every day, my family, my brother, my mother was featured in this newspaper. And yet, I went to school. My mother, a woman of faith, she would get up, go to work, go to church, and she would be at choir rehearsal or prayer meeting, and the saints would be reading the paper or hiding or snickering. What we saw in our mother during that time, she stood tall. She went to work, she took care of her children, she attended and supported her son. Every day we saw this woman stand tall through her obstacles. She was the epitome for me of resilience. And one of the proudest moments of her life before she transitioned was to be able to see all 6 of her children acknowledge Jesus Christ as their personal savior, pursue the lives that they wanted, and I guess go after their own success. For me, she got to see me become a minister, a principal. One of the things we were so excited about is that she felt like her job as a mom was achieved. And even before she transitioned, she was proud of all of her children. We saw her stand tall even in her final days. She is my first example of resilience. So my second example is involving my professional career. As a leader, I am a principal of a school, and as a leader, I experienced a challenge during my tenure. I had hired teachers that others would not hire, right? I gave them an opportunity. And at some point in that tenure, they challenged my leadership as a Black woman. That's not irregular in my field. That's not something that doesn't normally happen. I'm usually challenged because I might be the youngest person in the room. I might be the darkest person in the room. However it is, as a Black woman in leadership, I'm challenged. So here's the scenario. These 2 women challenged me. I addressed the situation, and somehow or another, they filed a grievance, if you will. They argued about the way that I handled the situation. And as a result, someone leaked that story to the media. And so here I am, in the prime of my career. I'm making moves, I'm turning my school around. I have the respect of my family, my community, and my school. And now I'm trending on social media for alleged comments and things that I've done that might be disparaging. I remember thinking to myself, what do I do? And I just remember people reaching out to me on social media, are you okay? You know, people chiming in one way or the other, are you gonna lose your job? My parents, my students, my children, even my family in the middle, trying to decide whether or not they would pick a side, right? And the worst part of it, if you will, was when my mother had to find out about it. Someone who, I guess, either they were concerned or an unidentified hater, decided to read the article verbatim to my mother in South Carolina. And so what was interesting about this, I never spoke about it. I never shared it with my family. I never really talked about it with my friends. And I certainly didn't talk about it with my mom. And so the reason was that I knew, something about me knew I would be vindicated. And I did not have to defend myself. I remember my pastor at the time telling me, this is where you allow your life to speak for you. Let your reputation go before you and speak for you. So finally, there's this conversation with my mother after she's been given the lowdown. And I remember her saying, well, you could do 99 things right, but the 1% that you don't do right or that is not pleasurable to man, that's what people are going to amplify. And she said to me, I still hear it to this day, if God be for you, who could be against you? Listen, I got quiet. I kept working. I took accountability for the part that I played in it, right? I met with my staff because we had come a long way. We've done great work. I addressed my parents about putting them in a space of this level of scrutiny. At the end of the day, I was vindicated, and I'm still the proud principal of that school. But when I tell you, it built my resilience, because as you stand in leadership, people look to you to be the model, to be the person that they can look up to. And so to be disparaged in such a way was a problem. But I know that the vindication came from God. And so I'm grateful. And this was just a second example, even in my professional career where everything was on the line, that my resilience was built. And I'm still standing. I'm still the proud principal, and I'm still doing great work in this tenure that I'm on. My last example that I chose wisely, and it's most current to me. It was February of 2018. It was my mother's birthday week that was coming up. And so I asked her if I could coordinate a trip for her to come up to Jersey. And she said to me, oh, that would be amazing. This trip, I wanted her to get to spend time with her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. And she was so excited to do it. My mother's birthday is February 29th. And this year it didn't come. In 2018, it didn't come. It would be celebrated on the 28th. And so she came up on Amtrak like she normally does. I picked her up, and we're driving back to my home. And so as we're driving, her phone rings, and she picks it up, and it's her doctor's office. And they're telling her, Miss Barnes, we need you to come in immediately. We need to discuss your blood work immediately. And she's like, do you know what today is? It's my birthday. And so the doctor says, oh, I'm sorry, happy birthday. And she says, I can't come in immediately because I'm in Jersey visiting my family. And so the doctor says, well, as soon as you get back, we need you to come in. I remember that moment driving to my home and saying, something's not right. And I remember her saying to me, don't say anything about it. I just want to enjoy my birthday, and we'll take care of this later. This is between me and you. Well, if anyone knows my mother, they know that it's between me and her, between her and her favorite sister, between her and her favorite brother, and maybe one other of her children. But nevertheless, I said nothing. She enjoyed her birthday, and she went back to South Carolina. Fast forward, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she began to deteriorate rapidly. That was February. By April, she was hospitalized, and they were giving us calls that we need to come and see about her. I share this story because we were able to get all of my siblings to South Carolina to see about my mother before her passing. My mother passed 18, and all of her children were there. And at some point, she got an opportunity to sit and talk to each and every one of them. And as it would be, on her last night on this earth, I was the last child that she was speaking to. So I was in the room with her. She was sleeping, at least I thought. And she was mumbling during her sleep. And she was talking, and she was sleeping. And I kept hearing her have conversations with people that I know have passed away. And so she kept saying, she was calling their names, and she was joyous, laughing. And then she kept saying, she ended with, thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all so much for coming. Well, I jotted those notes down when I heard her speaking in her sleep. And as Christians, we believe that when we transition, there is going to be a grand celebration. And so I felt like in that moment, I was getting a glimpse. Not that it actually happened, right? I was getting a glimpse of the grand celebration that my mother would receive when she transitioned. Let me tell you, I got up and I went to hug her, and she took her last breath and sort of rested her head in my chest. That was it. In the South, when people transition, not like the North, people come to your home in droves to view the body in the home. That was a bit much for us Northerners to take. Nevertheless, it happened. When her pastor came, I just remember the Spirit of God being all over me. And I thanked him for watching over her spiritual soul while she lived in South Carolina. But I looked him dead in his eye and I said, I'm going to tell the story. I'm going to tell the story. And what I meant by that was I would deliver her eulogy. We believe that the eulogy is a story, the life of a person lived for Christ. I was the person to tell that story. And so here comes the resilient piece. They carry my mother out of the home. I offer a prayer to all of those that are there, and I left that night. I got on the road back to Jersey. I ordered her an outfit, churchy, the way they like, and I began to work on telling her story. I came back for her funeral, preached my mother's funeral, and I took the red eye back to Jersey. The next day, I was at Fordham University starting my doctorate program with tears in my eye. For the next 3 years, I studied, I principled, I ministered. I did all aspects of my life's work with tears in my eyes, because that's what was required of me. That people needed to see, how was I going to go through this? How was I going to mourn this and still live the life that God had called me to live? Beloved, it wasn't easy. But I still heard my mother say, if God be for us, who could be against us? And so I stood tall. I eulogized her, and I started my doctorate program. And this year, I finished my doctorate program. I lost a lot of people along the way in that time frame, people that are still alive. So I had to mourn my mother, who actually transitioned, and I had to mourn people, places, and things that I still see every day. And I was able to do it because of the resilience that God has built in me. And so the next phase of it is, how do we build resilience? How do we build resilience? I gave you 3 simple examples. I could have given you so many, but I gave you 3. That's what we're going to talk about. Before I talk about how we build resilience, I want to go back to talking about the need for resilience, right? Resilience, again, I describe as the ability to endure challenges or obstacles and still stand. The great Marvin Sapp says, I'm stronger. When you go through obstacles, when you endure, he says, I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I'm better. Right now in this season, and for the last 3 years, we have been experiencing what I call 3 global pandemics. We are experiencing a health crisis with the onset of COVID-19 that has claimed over 800,000 Americans. The health crisis has also illuminated the inequality and disparities that exist among Black and brown people. That's the first pandemic. We are also experiencing an anti-Black crisis sparked by the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. These publicly viewed murders, along with so many others, started an uprising of people all over the world against white supremacy, police brutality, and senseless murders of Black people at the hands of white people in authority. People are relentless in uncovering the systemic racism that has been woven into the fabric of the country since its colonization. As a Black woman, this is nothing new to me. Over the years, I have seen it show up in healthcare, in education, civil rights, voting. It is consistently being exposed, and people are clear. And the Spanish word is basta, enough. They're not shoving it under the rug. They're not hoping for better. They want it exposed and they want it addressed. This is the second pandemic. And finally, we are experiencing an economic crisis, fueled partially by the health crisis, but in actuality, I hear Brother Malcolm X in my spirit gently proclaiming that the chickens are coming home to roost. Alas, we understand the capitalism that this country is built on. We have always had the haves and the have-nots. We understand that 10% of the population owns 75% of the wealth. The rest of us are struggling on a daily basis, but on the heels of a pandemic and a recent recession, long-standing businesses and entrepreneurs have had to close their doors, and the economy suffered tremendously. We are in a global pandemic, and the world needs resilience. So how do we build resilience? Knowing all that we know, how do we build resilience? People all over are struggling mentally, spiritually, and physically. In each of my examples, I was honest about the circumstances. In each example, I acknowledged that these instances were not my lot in life. That's just not how my life was supposed to be, but they were, in fact, obstacles or challenges in my life. That's very important. Sometimes our emotions, your emotions, and your mind will make you believe that things will never change. In times like these, we need our faith and, in some instances, therapy. A specialized therapist will help you walk through whatever the issue is and address it head on. You build resistance by going through, activating your faith and trusting in a sovereign God. In order to go through, you need courage to go through. I'm reminded of the biblical accounts of Moses at the Red Sea and Naaman at the Jordan. Moses was commissioned to free the Egyptians, and they found themselves stuck at the Red Sea. There at the Red Sea, they have to cross over, and Pharaoh and his army is behind them. Moses could have decided to quit. He could have decided to go back because the people were murmuring, oh, we were fine when we were in Egypt. He decided to go through. And when he moved forward, God parted the Red Sea so that he and the people can cross over safely, and Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea. He was willing to go through. God showed up. When you're willing to go through, God will show up. So then we have Naaman, who was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And nothing he could do could cure his leprosy. So he went to the prophet Elisha, and he instructed him, go dip in the Jordan, and his flesh would be renewed. His initial response was, I'm not going to no Jordan. That's like the Hudson River here. I'm not doing it. And so he began to think about it. If he wanted to be made whole, he had to go through his Jordan. Many of us have to go through our Jordans if in fact we want resilience, if in fact we want God to show up. When he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, his skin was brand new. So in order to build resilience, you're going to have to go through. When you go through, God shows up. In order to build resilience, you have to go through. And you have to activate your faith. If you have the courage to go through something, it gets rough, but your faith kicks in. I'm thinking about the biblical account of the 3 Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you know the story, they were thrown into a fiery furnace because they would not bow down to a king and they would not shift their diet. So they said, put us in the fiery furnace. We will not bow down. We're not listening. Put us in the furnace. And here's what they said. Our God will save us. And even if he doesn't, we know he's able. That's some faith. Because when you're going through, you may have all the confidence in the world to go through, but then when you get there, situations may make you waver. But they were clear. Put us in. Even if he doesn't deliver us, we know that he's able. And the story goes that they went into the fiery furnace and they came out unscorched, untouched, and unharmed because God was with them in their fire. Finally, in order to build resilience, you have to trust in a sovereign God. He knows what's best for us, and he has a plan for our lives. Some of the things that we are going through, God allows us to go through them. They're not just happening to us. When we go through and activate our faith, God gets the glory, and we get the benefit. I am thinking about the biblical account of Ruth. Ruth became a widow and displaced with her mother-in-law, Naomi. And she gave her an out. She told her, you don't have to stay with me anymore. You can go back, find yourself a husband. And she told her, no, I'm going to stay with you in this foreign land. So they were poor. And she began to glean or pick up the scraps from a field and take good care of her mother-in-law to make sure that she survived. Because she stayed in an impoverished situation, loved her mother-in-law, and was willing to work, Ruth ended up marrying rich and owning the very land upon which she was gleaning and gathering. She could have left, but her trust in the sovereign God made her stay. So in order to build resilience, you have to have courage to go through. You have to activate your faith when it gets hard. And you have to trust in the plans of a sovereign God. Let us pray. God, thank you for this word on resilience. Thank you for downloading this ministry in my life, faith and resilience. I pray right now for those viewing this episode. I pray that you would build their resilience. Let them know that challenges and obstacles will come. And if you allow them to come into their lives, it is to build their resilience. This world is in turmoil, and we have to turn back to God. Remind us, God, that you will show up, you will rescue us, you will plan an escape, and all things will work together for our good. Beloved, I hope you have a great understanding of the purpose of this ministry. It's not a church. It's not an e-church. It's not something that we've seen before. It is ministry. It is to help people build their faith and their resilience. Please tune in as we continue to broadcast episodes to build us up and build our resilience.